Washington, D.C., 6:32 a.m. The city's morning hum breaks not with sirens, but with a silence so wrong it chills the air. No alarms, no radar warnings, just an empty sky, until it isn't. A streak of light invisible to the defenses meant to guard the Capitol rips through dawn like a phantom blade. And then, impact. A flash so bright it erases shadows. Windows collapse into dust, asphalt boils. The White House shudders and vanishes in a roar of fire and stone. America's most sacred fortress is gone. Not by nuclear fire, not by a bomber overhead. By something far worse, a missile no system ever saw coming. This is a simulation, a warning of what might happen if China's newest ghost weapon were unleashed. The attack did not begin in Washington. It began years earlier in laboratories across Beijing, Chengdu, and Xi'an, where engineers whispered of a breakthrough. They called it HZ-57 Ghost, a hypersonic glide vehicle that didn't just fly faster than sound, it flew faster than truth itself. While American generals boasted about layered missile defense, radars that could see a baseball in orbit, interceptors designed to kill in the stratosphere, Chinese planners worked on something simpler: how to make a missile look like nothing at all. It was not stealth in the old sense. No radar-absorbing paint, no angles to scatter beams. Ghost wore a different disguise. At Mach 10, wrapped in a plasma sheath hotter than a volcano, it bent its own signature. Infrared sensors chasing a heat bloom? Ghost scattered false flares across the sky. Radar searching for echoes? Ghost twisted ionized air into shimmering mirages. Algorithms tuned to decades of ballistic trajectories? Ghost broke the rules, sliding, diving, zigzagging like lightning. For months, American satellites saw anomalies, blips over the Pacific, trails that vanished as suddenly as they appeared. Reports crossed desks in the Pentagon with words like possible decoy, plasma masking, unconfirmed. Skeptics laughed them off. China always exaggerated. Analysts shrugged. Every new weapon looks terrifying in theory, and politicians already drowning in other crises moved on. Until that morning. The launch happened far out over the Pacific, masked beneath the static of storms. A single flash, then nothing. American DSP satellites tracked a heat bloom, but the bloom fractured, splitting into dozens of phantom targets. The software marked it as clutter. No one's phone rang. On the eastern seaboard, a single radar operator noticed a faint distortion. A ripple in the spectrum, like a bubble sliding across the screen. It could have been anything: solar interference, ionospheric scatter, even a meteor. He flagged it for review, but protocols demanded certainty. No certainty, no alarm. Oh. Minutes later, certainty arrived in the form of fire. The ghost fell on Washington without warning. It was not nuclear, no mushroom cloud, no radiation. It was conventional, but devastating. A warhead packed with high-density explosives designed to flatten hardened targets. Its accuracy was surgical, its impact catastrophic. The White House crumbled. The seat of American leadership lay in ruins. In the Situation Room's bunker, chaos turned to paralysis. What hit us? From where? Why didn't we see it? Analysts scrambled through streams of data, but the truth was worse than ignorance. The systems had seen, but they had not believed. Ghost had not hidden. It had deceived. It fed the machines just enough lies to make them hesitate. And hesitation killed. Within minutes, allies called. London demanded answers. Paris offered condolences. Tokyo whispered what everyone feared. If it was Ghost, no city is safe. Beijing remained silent. No denial, no admission, only silence. The most ominous reply of all. For the first time in living memory, America's invulnerability cracked. The nation that prided itself on seeing everything, stopping anything, had been struck blind. The Pentagon's nightmare phrase echoed through every corridor. Uninterceptable, undetectable, unstoppable. But the worst wound was not physical. It was psychological. A government, a military, a people who believed their shield was iron now saw it was glass. And glass once shattered never looks the same. Sirens faded to a dull mechanical hum. Washington smoldered behind layers of cordon and caution tape. Across the Potomac, the Pentagon ran on caffeine, adrenaline, and a single directive: make the next strike fail. The first orders were not missiles. They were mindset. No single sensor or single service would be trusted again. The chairman's voice was flat. If one eye lies, let 100 eyes disagree. Within an hour, engineers were ripping through firewalls and doctrine, effusing systems that were never meant to talk. Over-the-horizon radars in Alaska, ionospheric sounders in Puerto Rico, passive RF arrays in the Midwest, weather satellites, civilian telescopes, even classified ocean surface scatter instruments, stitched into a mesh of reluctant collaborators. It was ugly, it was fragile, it was the only thing fast enough to matter. DEFCON ticked down a notch. Carrier strike groups in the Pacific changed their geometry, no longer parading in textbook rings, but stretching into long, deceptive lattices designed to complicate a ghost's terminal choices. Bombers stepped to the runway. Tankers fanned out like chess pawns guarding queens. In the Atlantic, Aegis cruisers slid into kill boxes where their radar horizons overlapped just so, and where their missile arcs could weave a net instead of a fence. At the White House's continuity site, the president faced the only question that mattered: retaliate immediately, or buy time for a defense that didn't yet exist. The Hawks argued for a decapitation strike on targeting nodes, launch fields, and command bunkers. The pragmatists said the quiet part out loud. If we swing and miss, we invite the third ghost to finish what the first began. The room inhaled as one. The president chose time. Not surrender, not fear. Time to rebuild sight before throwing a punch. Beijing stayed silent. PLA rocket force did not. Somewhere over the western Pacific, a second launch flashed and died on the screens. Heat, then silence. This time the mesh shivered. Not a clear track, just converging doubts. The OTH radar saw a smear. A weatherbird caught a line of ion glow where no aurora should live. A passive RF node flagged a whisper of plasma hiss detuning civilian broadcasts along a sweep. Individually, none of it justified panic. Together, it spelled ghost. The call rippled down the chain. Correlation confident, classification provisional, engage the corridor, not the dot. On a destroyer in the Philippine Sea, the Combat Information Center felt colder than the water outside. Solution? Negative on hard track, positive on corridor. The CO's reply was doctrine rewritten in one breath. Corridor is a track. Shoot the behavior. SM-66 punched skyward, not at a point, but into a future the computers predicted with all the humility of prophets. Far above, the first interceptor sliced empty air. Ghost kinked its path, shedding heat illusions like a serpent losing skin. The second cut closer. The third learned. When it met the glide body, the collision wasn't a fireball, it was a ruined equation. Plasma sheath torn, boundary layers rattled. For the first time, Ghost bled truth. The fourth interceptor did the rest. Cheers erupted, not triumphal but relieved, like a drowning man's first cough of air. The CIC didn't cheer. They were already pivoting to the next horizon. If there was a second, there could be a third. In the president's room, a wall of feeds flickered with green. Partial track, partial burn, partial intercept confirmation. The National Security Advisor didn't smile. We hit a ghost that was already wounded by physics, she said. Next one learns, next one compensates. So the mesh grew teeth. Air Force ISR redirected two RC-135s to patrol in odd layers of atmosphere, where thermal gradients made infrared signatures wobble in ways Ghost couldn't fully mimic. Navy E-2Ds retasked their operators to behavioral plots, watching acceleration patterns instead of chasing blips. A pair of unremarkable business jets, outwardly civilian, climbed to the top of their certified flight envelopes with cryogenic IR cameras repurposed from missile test ranges. Over the continental U.S., balloon-borne sensors, once canceled, now resurrected by panic, floated as high as weather would allow, listening for radio static that didn't belong. Cyber struck quietly. Not at cities, not at hospitals, at clocks. Precision timing sources that disciplined an adversary's guidance networks stuttered for fractions of a second. Synchronization links grew noisy. A hypersonic glide vehicle is a symphony of time constants. Jostle the conductor's elbow, and even a ghost can miss a note. Allies stepped in. Japan provided stare time from infrared satellites watching unusual latitudes. The UK shared arcane ionospheric models better suited to submarine comms than missile hunting. Australia, without fanfare, handed over a filter that could subtract sea clutter from coastal radar returns when the ocean wore a typhoon's face. Little things, quiet things. Together, a defense. Markets spiraled. Commentators screamed. But in the rooms that counted, the tone was clinical. We must force Ghost to choose, speed or stealth, the DARPA liaison said. If it flies gentle to hide, we have time to layer shots. If it flies violent to outrun, it will leak signatures we can catch. Either way, we shape its decision. Near midnight on the East Coast, the mesh sensed another wrongness. Not heat first, not radar. Silence. A band of radio hiss where there should have been chatter like a choir holding its breath. Then a faint sliding bruise and over the horizon returns. Then an optical wink at the edge of a telescope's patience. Correlation? Green enough. Classification? Ghost. Intent? A pause as if the data feared the word. CONUS bound. The call was calmer this time. Interceptors rose from land and sea. Fighters climbed to paint with long-wave IR. A high-altitude drone drifted into position to watch the sky bend around a body designed to be a rumor. On screens, there was no target, only negative space moving like purpose. The first salvo bracketed emptiness. The second shaved a probability field thinner. The third, guided not by a dot but by 1,000 weak agreements, found warmth inside cold air. Somewhere far above Appalachia, a hypersonic body flinched. It wasn't enough to kill. It was enough to mark. Mark locked, the Aegis operator said, voice finally cracking, handing to shooters. Shooters affirmed, commit. The Passy 3 battery commander in a nameless county did not know which city he was about to save. He didn't have to. He watched his screens draw a box where nothing visible lived, and he fired into faith. At T+11 seconds, the sky over the eastern seaboard did something beautiful and terrible. It sparkled. Not a single sunburst, but the messy glitter of many small, unsung successes. Debris fanned out like ash. The mesh hummed, finally in harmony. Silence fell in every room that mattered, then breathing, then orders. Hold retaliation. Hold? Hold, we hit 1. We hit 2. We can hit 3. We answer after we see the board. In Beijing, lights burned. In Washington, resolve did. Both capitals understood the same truth. Surprise had been spent. The next moves would be deliberate and worse. And somewhere over the Pacific, fuel tanks warmed, guidance computers woke, and a launch crew prepared a weapon with a new playbook, one that assumed the mesh could see. The world had learned a terrible new verb, to ghost. It meant to strike without being seen, to move like rumor through sensors, to exploit the gap between machine certainty and human judgment. The question now was not whether ghosts could be stopped, it was whether they could be chased down before the chase turned into slaughter. Day 5 opened with a chessboard of forces reoriented toward one aim: force the enemy into a mistake. The American mesh had become more than a patchwork. It was a hunting web. Commanders stopped asking which single system would win. They asked what combination of systems could make a winner of them all. That change in mindset produced innovation faster than factories could produce missiles. The first innovation was tactical. False decision shaping. Tactical deception units, cyber, EW, even faux telemetry, began to create convincing decoys at ranges Ghost might use. They flooded select corridors with synthetic heat plumes, radio chatter, and orbital signatures that mimicked launch patterns. Each phantom target was a test. Would Ghost commit to a vacuum where there was only noise? Would it peel away to chase a mirage? If it did, it revealed a pattern. It did. Over the South China Sea, a Ghost that had been baited toward a web of decoys showed behavior no human programmer expected. It favored adaptive concealment over speed, trading velocity for confusion. Its plasma sheath shifted oddly, creating asymmetric heat bands. That asymmetry, tiny sub-second anomalies in an otherwise perfect cloak, became the new breadcrumb. The mesh, learning on the fly, reweighted its priors. Where before it would veto a track as clutter, it began to see signatures of intent. The second innovation was kinetic fusion. No longer did interceptors hunt alone. Interceptors were paired with directed energy trials and fragmenting munitions, layered so that if a ghost shrugged off one strike, another would sever its control surfaces. A Navy cruiser launched an SM-6 that did not seek to detonate in mid-air but to nudge, to disrupt the aerodynamics of the glide body, to tear the plasma sheath so sensors could glimpse the metal beneath. Then, on a glass screen morning in Hawaii, real physics intervened. A ghost, call it Ghost 3, picked a bold profile. High, fast, a diagonal arc toward Guam's communications node. It was the one every planner had feared because if it reached its node, it would darken a swath of the Pacific and blind hundreds of Allied assets. Multiple layers hunted it. The mesh tracked a corridor. Missile salvos and directed energy pulses pruned it, but the ghost compensated, twisting again and again. It gained terminal advantage until it didn't. In the final 100 seconds, what broke the ghost was not a single shot, but a chorus of irritations. A cyber blip introduced micro-jitter into its inertial guidance. Nothing catastrophic, only a delay in how it executed a course correction. An experimental laser array meant to dazzle, not burn, produced a cascading erosion of its plasma boundary. And an SM-6, guided by a corrected solution calculated from the mesh's fused priors, found purchase on a composite skin now imperfect. The ghost tumbled, fragments fanning into a gray rain above the ocean. Guam's node was spared. The communications blackout never happened. Victory was not theatrical, it was administrative. Analysts called it a marginal success, enough to change calculus but not enough to end the war. The strategic effect, however, was seismic. For the first time, an operation intended to be invisible had produced a record: bits of debris, an altered flight log, a telemetry anomaly captured by a civilian observatory. That record was a proof point. It meant Ghost could be studied, reverse-engineered, and critically anticipated. Politically, the moment split capitals. In Washington, relief coexisted with dread. If ghosts could be corralled today, tomorrow they might fly smarter. In Beijing, argument erupted between hardliners who celebrated the weapon's tactical success and moderates alarmed that the world now saw vulnerabilities in the ghost concept. The PLA rocket force pushed to refine concealment. The Ministry of State Security insisted on accelerating cyber campaigns to blind mesh elements. Hawks advocated for further strikes. International actors, jittery and impatient, both urged restraint and threatened consequences if another ghost found a target. On the battlefield, the end of Day 5 looked like a long, ugly truce. Naval formations repositioned, air patrols rotated, cyber units salved damaged links. But beneath the surface, a new, more dangerous game had begun. If ghosts had once been purely kinetic weapons, they were now systemic. Part kinetic, part algorithmic, part social. They exploited not only radar and IR, but human expectation, legal restraint, alliance politics, and the slowness of deliberative institutions. You could intercept a missile, you could not as easily intercept doubt. It was in that liminal zone that the real danger lived. A single misinterpreted intercept could be read as an attack. A furious strike in retaliation, taken without full evidence, could cascade. Commanders on both sides knew the stakes. Rules of engagement were rewritten in the margins, in whispered messages between hotlines and in the back channels of third-party capitals. The Americans doubled down on one approach: institutionalized sensing. They did not merely add more sensors, they built a doctrine that made sensing collective and legal. Shared protocols with allies, transparent verification layers that could be examined without revealing war plans, and pre-agreed thresholds for action. The logic was simple: reduce ambiguity, not by hiding intentions, but by making the world a mirror. So when you looked at the glass, you could trust what you saw. In practice, that meant more than technology. It required new habits. Operators who trusted cross-domain fusion more than single-source certainty. Policymakers who preferred delay over rash retaliation. And commanders who accepted that sometimes the best strike is the one you never have to fire. Day 6 closed with a brittle optimism. The Ghost program, once a near myth, had been tested and found fallible. Yet its failures were teachable, and that was both comfort and curse. Comfort because the near-term threat had been blunted. Curse because the world now knew how to ghost, and knowledge spreads faster than fear. The culmination ended not with a decisive battle, but with a pivot. Warfare had tilted from platforms to systems, from missiles to narratives, from firepower alone to perception management. Whoever mastered that domain would define the next decade. The attack on Washington had cracked the illusion of invulnerability. The battles over the Pacific had cracked the illusion of inevitability. What remained on the seventh day of this simulated conflict was the hardest task of all: to end without collapsing into the abyss. By dawn, both capitals understood the stakes. In Washington, the President's Council faced a grim ledger. One city scarred, one ghost intercepted, another destroyed, a third crippled in flight. Proof that the weapon was not invincible, but also proof that it existed. In Beijing, the Standing Committee weighed silence against escalation. Silence meant preserving deniability. Escalation meant admitting ownership. Each option was perilous. Each option risked a war neither side could truly win. The U.S. military prepared for the worst. Carrier groups maintained kill box formations. Ballistic missile subs went deeper under the Pacific's black mirror. Air wings rotated with minimal downtime, their pilots bleary-eyed but iron-willed. Yet the mood had shifted. For the first time since day one, there was space for choice. America had not crumbled. China had not conquered. The world was staring into the gap between disaster and decision. Diplomacy, long ignored, forced its way back onto the stage. European allies demanded explanations but also pleaded for calm. Japan and Australia pushed for joint patrols, less as deterrence, more as reassurance to nervous citizens. Even rivals like Russia, who had watched with fascination, hinted at back-channel mediation. The message was clear: a war of ghosts might terrify superpowers, but it terrified everyone else more. Inside the Pentagon, analysts presented their final report to the president. The ghost system, they concluded, thrived in ambiguity. It could hide in clutter, mimic noise, twist expectations, but ambiguity was not invulnerability. Once multiple domains, infrared, radar, RF, cyber, optical, were fused into a single frame of truth, Ghost's tricks unraveled. It bleeds in the seams, one analyst put it, and seams can be widened. That insight gave Washington a choice. Strike back hard, obliterate Chinese launch sites, punish the rocket force, risk uncontrolled escalation. Or show the world something different. That deterrence in the 21st century was not just about bigger warheads, but about smarter shields. The president leaned into the latter. Orders went out, no retaliation yet. Instead, broadcast the mesh's success. Share the fragments of debris, the telemetry logs, the satellite footage. Turn fear into narrative control. Make the ghost less a weapon of terror, more a puzzle the world had begun to solve. Beijing, too, faced its reckoning. The Ghost program had promised invincibility, a strategic ace. Instead, it had exposed vulnerabilities, technical and political alike. Hardliners urged doubling down, launch a wave, saturate the mesh, break American morale once and for all. Moderates argued the opposite. Stop while the weapon still carried mystique. For if more ghosts fell, the aura would shatter completely. In the smoky rooms of Zhongnanhai, pragmatism whispered louder than fury. The order was given not to launch, but to pause. Silence could be read as anything: victory, prudence, denial. Better that than undeniable failure. The conflict tapered, not with treaties or triumph, but with a shared exhaustion. Forces remained poised, but the skies grew quieter. Diplomatic cables thickened. Intelligence agencies switched from battle rhythm to forensic rhythm, piecing together the week's fragments. And in living rooms around the world, people replayed the moment of the White House strike again and again, trying to imagine how close civilization had come to unraveling. In America, mourning gave way to resolve. The scar in Washington became both wound and warning. Politicians promised resilience. Scientists promised a next-generation mesh. Ordinary citizens, once complacent, suddenly understood that oceans were no longer moats. Fear was real, but so was defiance. In China, the official line blurred truth. State media framed the ghost as an experimental success, proof of deterrence. The silence about losses spoke volumes, but internally the debate had shifted. What good is a ghost if the world learns to see it? Better to file the weapon back into the shadows, a rumor rather than a tool. By the end of the 7th day, the war had no victors, only survivors. Survivors who understood that the battlefield had changed forever. Wars of the past were contests of armies, fleets, tanks, and planes. Wars of the future, if this simulation held any truth, would be contests of perception, speed, and networks of trust. He who blinded the other's systems might win. He who restored sight faster might endure. And he who misread the fog might burn the world down by accident. The final line of the Pentagon report read like an epitaph. The ghost taught us that uncertainty kills. Our survival depends not on certainty, but on managing doubt. This was a simulation, a fictional scenario exploring how a conflict between the United States and China could unfold if an invisible hypersonic weapon struck at the heart of power. It is not prediction, not advocacy, not prophecy. It is a reminder. The more terrifying the weapon, the greater the responsibility to prevent its use. Because in reality, survival will never come from ghosts. It will come from restraint.